Greetings, members, one and all of the Salivation Nation. Governments hate gold. Let's explore. That may seem like a rather silly notion, especially considering that what you're looking at here is a display of government-issued bullion coins, and in fact, two of these don't have any dollar-denominated or denominated value on them, but nonetheless, they're recognized as having the backing of the governments that issue them. And so it seems kind of crazy to think, well, if they hate us so much, then why would they produce these coins each year for the general public? And also, why do their central banks hold gold? Well, essentially, they do that for the same reason you and I hold gold, because they don't want the liability of another government. And certainly, we don't want the liability of our government on our shoulders. And that's what happens whenever we hold these debt instruments known as fiat notes. This is a Federal Reserve note from a private institution that is essentially controlled by the government. And we are referencing an article here that was shared with me by a member of the community that I think really kind of lays out this case. And it's information that most of us already understand, but sometimes it's good to have a refresher course on this to talk about a little bit about the role of government and the role of private enterprise and also the role of money in our lives and in the institutions and the bureaucracies of government. So yes, governments do hate gold, mainly because they can't print it. They can mint it, but they cannot print it. In other words, gold can be mined and produced into blanks and issued as coins, bullion, for the general public, or they can also be cast or struck into bars. But nonetheless, they can accumulate it, they can mint it, and they can sell it, but they cannot create it out of thin air. It's difficult for them to control. And because they can't easily control it, gold has little use to them during the never-ending schemes to tax and then redistribute wealth. So in other words, they can't control with it. They can regulate it. We've seen that in the past. Now, we look at India as a recent example of a government trying to control gold imports through increased taxation on imports and imposing rules, such as the importers had to re-export 20% of imports as gold jewelry. So those types of rules and regulations are difficult to enforce, and smuggling of gold into India skyrocketed. You've heard me multiple times do stories about the famous up the butt, smuggling gold bars literally up the rectum in order to avoid detection from these situations. And probably a lot more has gone through without being detected. So they're difficult to enforce. And they're very difficult to tax, especially in the form of jewelry or physical precious metals. So there's other points about why governments essentially kind of disown gold, even though central banks do hold gold in their possession, but they do it for the same reasons you and I do it, in order to protect themselves from the liabilities of other governments. And it's about really the ultimate hedge against economic instability, even if it's economic instability created by the very governments themselves. Because what is the Federal Reserve? What are some of these central banks? They're private institutions controlled by the government. So legal tender laws mean that all taxes must be paid in fiat currency and not gold or silver, which is held in physical form. Nothing but sponsored fiat currencies issued by the government is acceptable to pay these debts and taxes. And so why do they pass these laws? Because in long-running series of decisions from 1921 until 1971, Western governments, in response to politicians creating ever larger government spending, countries decided they prefer interference and redistribution over letting capitalism and ingenuity grow the pie for everybody. And, we talk about how this pie of this ever-growing GDP has grown so much over the last 50 years. And a lot of that is derivatives and the like and futures and all of that. But none of that ever can match up to the true value of physical gold in your possession there. That's really what it's about. It's about having the ultimate control outside of government entities and institution. And some wealth is really essentially can be sliced out by government, and the only way they can do that is if they have control of the money that they issue, and they don't have that with gold. We have seen in the past the world when the world over failed because the government applied the wrong policy in response to liquidity problems. So what do? They try to repatriate some of that gold. In the United States, they essentially seized it by banning citizens from owning it and buying it back at a certain price, and then the next year raising that fixed price of gold. So they definitely threw one over on us on that particular case. And so the government is helping to set the rules for industries and influence industries via regulation. It becomes clear that the government is liable for when a regulated industry fails. You can't regulate gold. Once it's in your possession, or once it's in their possession, there's not much you can do with it. And that is one of the attractive features about gold. The U.S. government, along with many others that were on a gold standard, they could not print more U.S. currency without more gold because of that gold standard. It provided limitations to what they could do with money. And so that is when this seizure began. The UK put into place restrictions which limited citizens to owning no more than 4 gold or silver coins and restricted any imports of gold for private citizens. The U.S. government paid well below market prices for the seized gold and then raised the prices to a higher official rate, as we talked about. This allowed the government to then print more dollars to bail out the banks. Gold was officially banned for individual ownership in the U.S. until the 70s. But then the underground market prevailed, and because gold is a physical asset, it was easily hidden from government raids. You can pack a lot of value in a very small, tight space, which is one of the attractive features of gold that I think even holds well above silver in that case. Gold has gained value against all currencies since government abandoned this gold standard. The existence of gold in the economy is a constant reminder of the poor quality of the government paper and derivatives, and it has always poses a threat to replace the paper in the country's money. Even with the government giving all of the backing of its prestige and its legal tender laws to its fiat paper, gold coins in the hands of the public will always be a permanent reproach and menace to the government's power over the country's money. This is why in Turkey, the most popular gold coin in the world is held by Turkish citizens. You don't see them very often outside of Turkey, but they are minted and distributed to their people because they themselves don't trust their currency. It's a fascinating story how the Turkish people have really essentially, in a way, said no to their fiat currencies, and they hold gold coins and have for many, many years. Central banks are, for the most part, privately held, but controlled by the government, as we mentioned earlier. They derive their power to create and control fiat currency from the government. And essentially, that's socialism, folks, and that's been in effect in this country since the Federal Reserve Act of December of 1913. So long as people use their money, the central bank is happy. So if you take away these gold coins and you use the fiat currencies, well, they're happy. And you know what? We all have to use these bills, these notes that are legal tender for all debts, public, private, to pay our debts. But we also use them to buy our gold. And so that is a little bit of a difference. And how can you square one with the other? Well, I think it's quite easy, because we know that every time we use our fiat currency to buy this gold coin, we are indeed taking some of our money and transferring it from one system into another. We are empowering ourselves. We have become our own central bank. And every time we hold more of this gold and silver as well in our possession, that is money that is not circulating as these fiat notes. These fiat notes, which by design have decreased in value annually at a rate of 2.5%, or about 2%, and then it became recognized as 2.5%, and now it's 6.2% at a rate of 1% every 30 days. So yes, we are using these currencies, but we empower ourselves by using less of it when we transfer our wealth from this to that, to gold. And I think that is empowering. And governments don't like that. So the problem when people find this alternative, and the biggest alternative is gold. However, we are seeing cryptos also replace these fiat currencies as well. Governments don't like that either, but I believe they can take those away much easier. Anything digital they can ban. They can essentially make Bitcoin here in the United States go to zero if they really wanted to, especially with the ever-increasing power that the federal government is getting these days. So we have a dual mandate from the Federal Reserve and must maintain price stability while also simultaneously promoting maximum employment. Promoting this maximum employment is their goal. And how they do that? Do they really have that much power to be able to promote maximum employment? It's a private sector that does that, and we're not really unleashing the private sector to be able to make that happen. In fact, the government, as well as the Federal Reserve, are doing things to work in the opposite direction, to minimize employment, because they want to be, because really it's about the government's controlling even our lives, our every lives, including sourcing income. And if they can source the income, they can control what you do. If they don't have that control over the income, and it's a private institution that doesn't, you are more in control of your life than the federal government. So this hatred of gold is nothing new. They hate it when the price of gold rises because it correlates with the rising unemployment and other factors, economic factors that are unstable. That's what gold is there for. But when operated on a gold standard, the U.S. government was limited in terms of its ability to pursue deficit spending. It could only accrue so much debt. Where are we at now? We're about to approach $29 trillion. We know we're going to 30. It's pretty much in the books, but they can't spend it fast enough. That's the problem. They're passing all these bills when the dollar amounts are so large, they can't even spend it fast enough. The gold standard forced the practice of austerity. When the government abandoned the gold standard, it gained the power to finance any national expense by simply borrowing from the Federal Reserve. Today, no amount of gold is necessary for the Fed to purchase Treasury bonds. It is blessed with the ability to expand their balance sheet with zero limitations. Gold limits the power and influence of central bankers and governments, so it's no wonder why they hate it. And by the way, our government hates the Constitution and the Bill of Rights as well. The Bill of Rights and Constitution limits the power of the federal government and empowers people. Gold does the same thing. So I believe the best course of action for us is to embrace that which the government hates, and that is the Constitution of the United States, along with the Bill of Rights, and physical gold. Physical gold in your possession. Not that there's anything wrong with investing in gold derivatives or ETFs or mining stocks or whatever, but I believe it's incumbent upon us to have the ultimate form of wealth preservation, physical gold in your possession. It's worth the premiums to have it. Gold is something that has stood the test of time and will continue to. And so that's why governments hate gold, but you and I as individuals, well, we have a different view. We see it as a savings account and insurance policy against economic instability. and as a way to empower ourselves from the government. So there you go. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Would like to extend a multitude of gratitude to you all for taking the time to watch, and encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.